Hey guys, welcome back to We're Talking Movies. This is Cade, joined by Andrew, and today we are going to be doing our first tier list ranking. And for today, we are going to be ranking the Pixar movies. All right, Andrew, so first up on the list, we have the original Toy Story. I think that this is definitely a fantastic movie, definitely a great Pixar film. It's always been one of my favorites ever since I think I was a toddler. I used to watch it all the time. Has it ever been one of your favorites?
Yes, it's one of my absolute favorites from this. I would say an S. What about you? I think it kind of has to be since it's their first movie too.
I would definitely give this movie an S tier.
I mean, even if it wasn't an amazing movie, which it is, do not get me wrong. I think just for the history of it, I think it would have to be an S.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, next up we have Toy Story 4. So I'm not gonna lie, this is my least favorite Toy Story movie of all of them, but I will say that I think it still is a decent movie and a good watch. It's one of those movies where I don't think it was necessary, but I'm glad that it was made, and I think it is a worthy entry in the franchise.
Yeah, that's kind of my same sentiments. I did like it, but again, it's probably I don't know if it's my least favorite in the quadrilogy, but it's definitely not my absolute favorite. But it's again by no means a bad movie. It's still pretty damn solid. I'd say either high B or low A, but we can work on that in a minute. I will say this movie does benefit from having one of the creepiest villains in the franchise.
Gabby Gabby.
Oh yeah,
All right, I think I'll give it a yeah, okay, I'll put it in B.
yeah, that's what I think. Again, it's good. Do not get me wrong, but it's not my favorite.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, next up we have Toy Story 2. Definitely, in my opinion, a very great sequel. I think it's one of the few sequels that's actually better than the original. I like how it's different from the original. I like the different themes that it explores. And yeah, I think it's definitely a great movie. I think it is worthy of an S tier.
I would say S tier. Yeah.
Well, next up on the list, we have Toy Story 3. I'm not going to lie, man. This is actually my favorite Pixar film of all time. Ever since I first saw it when it came out, I love the storyline. I love all the character dynamics. It hits home the most for me, if that makes sense. And yeah, it is my favorite Pixar film.
Oh yeah. If it's not my absolute favorite, it's definitely up there. Best villain in the series with Lotso. That emotional gut punch of a of a scene in the furnace. And it really is a perfect ending because yes, they're saying goodbye to Andy, but now they've got another kid that they get to make happy.
Yeah, with that, I'm definitely going to have to put this in S tier.
Oh yeah, no, that's a Toy Story 3. That's an amazing movie.
Well, and next up, we have A Bug's Life. Again, this is another movie that I grew up rewatching a lot. I don't consider it one of the best Pixar movies ever made, but I think it is still a very good movie.
I would agree. I will say this is one of the few Pixar movies where the animation has not aged horribly well. But I do still like it. It's just not one of my favorites. So, what are you thinking? B?
I think I would give this movie a B. I think it's still a good movie. Not one of the best, but still worthy of a B, I think.
Yeah, I can agree with that. It's not as good as Toy Story 4, so I'd put it under that.
All right, well, next up, we have Finding Nemo.
S. I will let nothing less than an S for this movie.
Oh, yeah, this is definitely an S film. The story is great. The characters are awesome. Marlin, Dory, Nemo. Yeah, it's definitely an S film.
Oh yeah, and it's beautifully animated too. Plus, I have an emotional connection to this movie because my godmother took me to see this when my sister was being born.
That's right. Yeah.
But no, S tier, I will let nothing less for that movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up, we have Finding Dory. So I think that for this movie as a sequel, it was pretty decent. Again, it's not a Pixar movie that I consider one of the greatest ones, but I do consider it a good continuation from the first movie.
I will agree it has some good moments. It has some new characters I like. Like I really love the sea lions, especially Nigel. But yeah, not my favorite. Again, I did enjoy it, but it's kind of weirdly kind of forgettable for me.
I think I'll give this movie a B tier. I think it's worthy of a B.
I'd say low B.
Well, next up, we have Monsters Inc. Right off the bat, I'm going to say this belongs in the S tier. This has always been one of my favorite Pixar films. I think it's fantastic. I love the duo Mike and Sully. I love the journey they go on with Boo. I think it's definitely, yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. It's just such a great movie. And yeah, it belongs in S tier. What do you think?
I would say S tier, yeah.
All right, well, next up, Monsters University. I consider it an okay movie. I don't think that it's, again, not one of the best Pixar films, but I mean, it was nice seeing young Mike and young Sully, but yeah, no, I don't think it's necessarily an A or a B. I think I would put it in C tier.
Yeah, C seems appropriate. And remember, again, much like Finding Dory, it's kind of just forgettable for me. Because again, like you said, I really like seeing, the origin of Sully and Mike's friendship. But Outside of that, there's not really much I super duper cared about this movie. I thought it had some decent college related gags in the monster world, but that, yeah, again, kind of forgettable for me.
Yeah, I understand. Well, next up on the list is The Incredibles. This is definitely an S tier film.
Oh, yeah.
This, I think, could be considered one of the greatest superhero movies ever made, honestly.
Yeah. And this is whenever any or the topic of, oh, there's never been a good live act, there's never been a good Fantastic Four movie ever made. To which I then point out, have you seen The Incredibles?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm definitely putting this in S tier.
Yeah, no, that's a really good movie. I don't think anybody will argue that that's an S tier.
All right, well, next up we have Incredibles 2. So I think that this was definitely a good sequel. I don't consider it better than the first one, but I think it's still definitely a good movie. And I think it's definitely worthy of B tier. It could be an A tier. What do you think?
Um, if this wasn't in the middle of Pixar's really Disney and Pixar's twist villain era that they were on for a little while, I would say that this is an A tier. Though weirdly enough, with this movie, I actually like the superhero aspect less than I like just Bob trying to be the stay-at-home dad. I would say B tier because again, this was the peak of Pixar's surprise villain era, and we'll get to that in a minute. But
All right, well, next up on the list, we have Cars. So, again, this is another movie I grew up as a big fan of. I think it's definitely a good movie. I think that the characters are awesome. I like Lightning McQueen's arc throughout the movie, and I think that all the racing scenes are really cool. I think it's definitely, I don't know if I would consider it A tier. I think it's a good B.
I'd say, yeah, I would say B because it's not Pixar's best franchise by a mile, but the first one is still a solid movie, and I think it's got a very underrated soundtrack too.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, next up we have Cars 2. I found this movie to be a very underwhelming sequel. I was excited to see it when it first came out, and yeah, I just remember being disappointed. I mean, I can see what they were going for, but yeah, I think it's definitely one of my least favorite Pixar films.
It's just got way too much going on and in it.
Yeah, so where do you think it belongs?
Well, I think it has to be an F because this was their first Razzie nomination. So I feel like just based on that alone, it has to be an F. It's just not a good movie.
All right, I'll put that in F tier. All right, well, next we have Cars 3. So I consider this definitely a better movie than Cars 2. Not as good as the first one, but I think it's still an okay movie.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely better than Cars 2. I like how it kind of deals with the idea of Lightning McQueen sort of dealing with his own mortality, which is a weirdly heavy topic for an animated kids movie. Plus, I also like the fact that they kind of touch on the origins of NASCAR in this movie with the idea of the moonshiners in the hills souping their cars up to run. I mean, not an amazing movie, but definitely better than Cars 2.
I think I would give this a C tier.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. C in that category.
All right, well, next up we have Ratatouille. This is, in my opinion, definitely an S tier film. I've always loved the concept of this movie. I love Remy as a character, his dynamic with Linguini, the other characters like Ego, who I think is such a great and funny character. Yeah, I always love movies about food, and yeah, I think it definitely belongs in S tier.
Oh yeah, no arguments from me here. One of my all-time favorite Pixar movies, and honestly, probably would crack my top 10 favorite movies of all time list.
All right, yeah, I'll put that in S tier. Wally. All right, any opinions on this movie, Andrew?
I really love Wally, but I watched it again recently. It does feel a little longer than it needs to be, if that makes any sense. So because of that, I can't put it in the S tier, but it is definitely an A tier movie.
Yeah, I agree. When I was younger, I actually was kind of critical on this movie, but as I've gotten older, I've appreciated it more. And yeah, I'll definitely give it an A tier. Next up, we have Up. This for me is definitely an S tier film. It's one of the best Pixar movies, in my opinion. I think the storyline is great. I love Mr. Fredrickson. I think Russell's a great character. Doug is a hilarious character. Love the idea of the journey. And yeah, for me, it's always been one of my favorite Pixar films.
I will agree. Not one of my favorites, but still really good. Also, I need to mention the saddest opening of a movie maybe ever.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah, with that, just because of how emotional it is and how deep it is, yeah, I think it definitely deserves to be an S tier.
Yeah, no, that's definitely an S tier for me.
All right, well, next up we have Brave. I have seen Brave. I've seen it a couple of times, and from what I remember, I thought it was a good movie, but I've never considered it one of the best Pixar films. Like, I don't think I really consider it an S tier, or I don't think I consider it an A tier either, to be honest.
I mean, I really like that they did something different doing an animated fantasy movie, if it, basically with elements of witchcraft and mythology, et cetera, et cetera. I think B tier, yeah, not one of my all time favorites, but still a really enjoyable movie.
Next up, we have Inside Out. I know that this is often regarded as one of the greatest Pixar films. I will agree. For me, it's never really been so much an S tier. I consider it more of an A tier film. But what about you?
I think A is a perfect spot for it because it is a really good movie, and it's the perfect movie to put on if you want to just feel something.
Yeah, for sure.
Plus, it just such an original concept too.
All right, I'll put that in A tier. All right, well, next up we have Inside Out 2. I have yet to see Inside Out 2. I do plan to see it eventually, but yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I have not had a chance to see it yet either, so that's going to be have to go in our haven't seen category.
All right, well, next up we have The Good Dinosaur. Yeah, I have seen this movie. I thought that it was an okay movie. I don't consider it one of the more memorable Pixar films, but definitely I think it's an okay movie if that makes sense.
The fact that I think that I completely forgot this movie existed until you brought it up, I think speaks to its quality. I don't know. I'm thinking more D tier.
All right, I'll put it in D tier. Well, next up on the list we have Coco.
Oh my God, I love this movie. I love this movie. I love the music. I love the animation style. I love the Dedos de los Huertos theme to it, which is something I'm already a big fan of. I love the fact that it deals with such or brings in such pop culture icons from Mexican culture, like the wrestler El Santo, and just that. Oh my God, that final scene just makes you cry. I love this movie. Love this movie.
Yeah, it's definitely a great movie. I agree with everything you just said. Here's a question though. Is it more S tier or is it A tier?
I don't think it has quite reached S tier yet. It is very good. Do not get me wrong. It is a very good movie. I don't think it's quite reached that legendary status of what we have in S tier. So I think A tier.
Yeah, I agree. All right, it goes in A tier. Well, next up we have Onward. What's your opinion on this movie?
Much like Good Dinosaur, this is one of the ones I always forget exists. However, unlike Good Dinosaur, this one actually I remember watching and liking a little bit more. I thought Chris Pratt and Tom Holland as voice actors actually played off each other really well. Plus the fact that it's kind of like it's a fantasy road trip movie, I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely love their dynamic, Chris Pratt and Tom Holland. And with that, I don't think it belongs in C tier. I'm willing to give it a B tier.
I'd be willing to give it a B. I think the fact that it came out just before the pandemic got really bad, I think is kind of the reason why nobody really remembers it.
All right, well, next up we have Soul.
Now, I have a lot to say about Soul.
Go ahead.
In my opinion, the most underrated Pixar movie of all time. This is a much more this movie deals with some very mature themes for a kids movie. The idea of death and living up to your potential, plus the fact, it starts with the main character dying. It's a very good movie. It deals with some very heavy topics, but still has that Pixar charm to it. Very good soundtrack. Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails actually was the gentleman who composed the score for this movie, and he did a phenomenal job with it.
Yeah, definitely. The soundtrack is great. I do like the characters in this movie, and I do like how it's a movie like other Pixar films that manages to have charm and it also manages to be very deep and emotional. So that's one of the things that I like about it. I'm kind of debating whether to put this in A tier or B tier. Where do you think it belongs?
I think this is A tier. I think this is a phenomenal movie, and again, I do not think it gets talked about nearly enough because again, it came out direct to Disney Plus because of the pandemic.
All right, then A tier it is. And next up we have Luca.
I have not seen.
I have not seen it either, so I'm gonna see it eventually. But yeah, we'll put that in.
I mean, I've heard it's cute and a fun movie, but I have not seen it, so I can't judge it.
And Turning Red.
I don't know if I don't think I've seen this one either.
Yeah, we're sorry that we haven't seen all these, you guys, but we're gonna see them eventually. Yeah, I'm gonna put that in haven't seen. Lightyear. So I found this movie kind of forgettable, and honestly, because of the fact that it didn't have Tim Allen, it just wasn't as memorable for me. That's part of the reason why.
Yeah, I really liked the animation style for for Lightyear. I liked the kind of more gritty style it had. But yeah, no, it kind of forgettable in general. So, what do you think? C?
I kind of want to put this in D tier, to be honest.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm not going to argue with you on that one.
Well, finally, we have Elemental.
Don't think I saw it, though I saw the trailer for it about 500,000 times because I swear it was in front of every movie I went and saw in 2023.
I have seen Elemental. I think I saw it one time before. I thought that it was a decent movie overall, and it's another movie I don't consider one of the best Pixar films. I'm not sure if I would give it a B tier. I think it's worthy of a C tier, to be honest. All right, guys. Well, that's the end of our Pixar tier list ranking. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram, Threads, and Twitter, and we will see you later.